Hey everyone, welcome to today's edition of One Single Story, where each weekday we offer a brief lesson from a section of today's reading, then we examine a single relevant question that passage points us to. Today I'm joined by Dylan Wilkin, and we're looking at this. I almost said Wilking. Wilkin, and we're looking at a passage in Numbers 23. So once God made it clear to Balaam that when he arrived he was to speak over Israel only what God had given him, the prophet proceeded to visit Balak, and he prophesied over Israel. However, he declared a blessing over Israel rather than a curse. And during the prophecy, Balaam identified Israel as a people who lived by themselves, set apart from other nations. So, what is it that set them apart, right? Israel was set apart because God was their center. Israel's national identity existed because God chose Israel. This means that God was not merely surrounding nations who all had national gods. It meant that God was central to Israel's identity as a nation. So without God, Israel simply would not be a nation. Israel was also set apart because their existence bore witness to God's existence and his work. The nation of Israel was created for the purpose of demonstrating to the world who God was and what God was like. So in spite of Israel's many failures, God would use the nation to show himself to the world, ultimately through the person of Jesus, the Messiah. And the very fact that Balak wanted to curse Israel demonstrates how Israel's national identity is countercultural to the surrounding world. So like God himself and like the Messiah, Israel would be hated. They would be persecuted. They would be attacked because they were called to represent God to the world. And there's parallels here to Christianity. Christians are also called to be different from the world. Christians are different because God is our center, because without Christ, we wouldn't have that identity. Christianity is called to bear witness to God's existence and to his work in the world in the person of Jesus the Messiah. And Christianity is also countercultural to the surrounding world. We're called to represent God to the world, and the spirit of the world resists Christianity. So, Dylan, as a Christian, do you feel like you are different from the world?
I think in a lot of areas, I think first we need to identify what is a Christian, right? Are we are we a Christian, or are we somebody who identifies in air quotes as such? Do we walk by the Bible? Do we walk by the teachings of Jesus? And do we put our faith in man, or do we put our faith in God? After we've done that, I would say as a Christian, I'm definitely different than the world, right? Because my identity is built on Jesus, while the world is built on the world and the things of the world. And I'm not gonna be as bold to say the world is built on sin. I mean, it is, but simply the world is built on other people. As without being a Christian, we identify ourselves with the world, with the people around us. That's how we say that we're good. That's how we say that we're loved, is by people. But as Christians, we can say we're loved by Jesus. We walk by Jesus. We walk by faith. And so I definitely do think we are set apart and different from the world.
In America, is considered Christianity's more common, the common religion.
Yeah.
Is it fair to describe ourselves as countercultural at this point?
And here's why I said earlier, what do we say a Christian is? Is somebody who follows Jesus and follows the way of the Bible, or is it somebody who identifies as such? I'd say in today's world, we're living in a world where people could say that they're Christian, but there's a line between, I don't know, believing in God and believing that there is a higher power and saying that you're a Christian versus really acknowledging what Jesus tells us to do and how we should live. So I think as a true Christian, I think we are countercultural, and I think that's what we are as our heart, or at the base.
In what ways? What ways would you consider the church today to be countercultural, or Christianity to be countercultural?
I think in the way that we speak, in the way that Christians should speak. And this is all should, right? Because if you say, how is the church countercultural? Well, some of the church is not where they should be. It's not where they should be. And they're still called the church, or they're a part of a church, right? I'm trying to think. I think number one, in the way that we speak, in the way that we talk to people, and the way that we show love. The world shows love completely different than Christians show love. We show love in the hard way, right? Non-Christians will show love in an accepting way. It's okay to do that. It's fine. It's okay to live in your sin. We love them so much that we want to teach them the way of Jesus and how to get out of that. So I think that is the first way. That we're countercultural, well, different from the world that way.
I think in the early church, some of those things would have been easier to spot than they are today. The church tribe world that I grew up in, there was a distinct attempt to make us look different, talk different, act different, go to places different. But I would say over my lifetime, it has become, the lines have become a lot more blurred. The dress isn't as distinctive, right? Today, hairstyles aren't as distinctive, even though I can pick out a worship pastor or a youth pastor a mile away. They're kind of easy.
Can I tell a story real fast?
Sure.
Real fast. We went to a church when we were down in Florida a couple months back. Me and Bella and her grandparents. And I walk into this church. It's a fairly I say progressive, but that's a different term nowadays. It was a modern church, right? Very modern church, very moving lights. The whole spiel. I walk in and I'm wearing a hat, right? It's just who I am. And they look at me and they go, youth pastor, no, worship pastor. And I've never met these people. I'm just walking in for the first time. They have no idea who I am. Me nor Bella, they have no idea who we are. And they're like, worship pastor. And I'm like, yeah, they just cracked up laughing. Like the whole space, there were like 20 people greeting right there. They just all die laughing just because it's just funny. You can definitely pick out a worship or youth pastor from a mile away.
I've been around church that you can. I was on a cruise one time and I saw this man and woman, and I told Barbara, I said, I will bet you money that man is a Church of God preacher.
That's hilarious.
Somewhere in the South. And so we're in each other's proximity, and I struck up a conversation. I said, what do you do? He said, I'm a pastor. I said, what denomination? He said, I'm in the Church of God. And he said, I'm in South Carolina. So I was
That's
2 for
hilarious.
2, right?
That's amazing.
But it's not as distinctive as it used to be, right?
Yeah.
You used to be able to identify certain tribes. It's not that easy. And even in there are things that, and how we treat people, even there are things like social justice movements that have risen that aren't associated with Christianity, that do certain things that look Christ-like, right? And so I don't think, particularly in America, we're as countercultural as we would like. As a matter of fact, we want to dominate culture. We do that through politics. There's a lot of, debate about what that looks like. There's a myriad of ways where we become involved. So why do you think the spirit of the world resists the Christ of Christianity?
We talked about the last podcast I was on. We talked about seeing God for what He is versus how the world sees God, right? And we talked about how God is seen as more of a dictator to people of the world rather than the loving Father that He is. And I think that's the primary reason, right? They see Christ as somebody who I don't even know. I would just say they don't see what God wants for them. They don't see that there is free will. I think a lot of non-Christians get confused by us following in the will of God. They think that that's the only way. They have free will. You have choices. I mean, you have a choice, right? You don't have to. We're not being ripped along the path. We're choosing to do these things every day, and we're choosing to crucify our flesh every day. But I think most people see Christ as a person with control issues versus like the loving Father I think He truly is. I think that's a common misconception.
Yeah, and I think people do not want life change. They want salvation, but they don't want sanctification piece.
Yeah.
And so
Absolutely.
it pushes back against, they're fine as long as we're doing things they agree with or expectations match their expectations, but they're not cool any other way. So,
yeah, absolutely.
Well, thank you for joining us today on this edition of One Single Story. We hope you'll be back with us tomorrow as we continue a conversation around our daily Bible reading.